Hey everybody, this is TJ King, host of the Peahen's Ponderings podcast. In this video, I'll demonstrate 2 different ways to start your fiber on a supported spindle. For this particular video, I'm going to use this Spanish Peacock Russian lace spindle. It's a little shorter than they tend to be. On average, a Spanish Peacock Russian is about 12 inches, and this little guy is only 10 inches. And what that's going to do is make it easier for you to see the tip of the spindle as I'm doing this demonstration. The bowl I'm using, also Spanish Peacock, has a flat base. If you've seen some of my other videos, you know I usually use a bowl with a curved base because I normally spin with my legs straight out, and a curved bottom to a bowl allows it to rest smoothly in my lap. However, for this video, I need the bowl to be sitting as far down as possible. Again, so the height of the bowl and the height of the spindle overall makes it easier for you to see the tip. The fiber I'm using today, just like in all my other videos and when I'm teaching classes, is superfine merino. I use superfine merino because it drafts so easily. It allows you to focus on the mechanics of operating the spindle rather than trying to draft your fiber. Now, with these 2 different techniques for starting your fiber, I'm going to start with the one that's a little bit easier for people who are new to supported spinning. What we're going to do is create a leader to attach our fiber to while starting. The leader can be made out of any kind of string, although I do recommend that it be something waxed. If you're looking for a quick and easy option, you can just use waxed dental floss. The wax allows it to stick to the spindle shaft as we're getting started. The length of leader I recommend is about twice the length of the spindle overall. So you could make it a little bit longer if needed, but I certainly wouldn't go any shorter because you need that length to wrap up the shaft to the tip to give somewhere for the fiber to attach to. So once you have your length of leader cut, just put a small knot at the bottom so it doesn't come undone, because we do need this loop to attach the fiber. And it doesn't matter when you're wrapping this around the base of the spindle if you have the knot to the top or the smooth end to the top or anywhere in between, just whatever works for you. Now, with this particular spindle, because of how steeply sloped the shaft is, I sometimes have a hard time getting the leader to stay put. If you're encountering the same thing with your spindle, you can either try putting a little bit of beeswax around the shaft where the leader is attaching. I don't always recommend that because it can leave residue on the spindle, which can get into the rest of your fiber. Another option is to just use a small piece of masking tape. You want it to be relatively small so it stays flat against the spindle so it doesn't stick out and mess up your balance. And we'll just slap that guy on right there. So you see it's a nice smooth connection, nothing sticking out to affect the balance or get in the way of your spindle fiber. And now I have my leader attached to my spindle. Here's where I personally struggled the most when I was first learning to supported spin years and years and years ago. You have to wrap the leader and subsequently your singles yarn in the correct direction for how you're flicking your spindle. So in my case, when I flick the spindle, I'm using my right hand because my right hand is stronger than my left hand, and I push with my thumb and pull with my fingers. And as you can see, that makes the spindle rotate clockwise. A clockwise rotating spindle will produce a yarn with a Z twist. On the other hand, if I were to push with my fingers and pull with my thumb, the spindle would rotate counterclockwise, giving me an S twist. By the same token, if I'm flicking with my left hand because I find that my right is more dexterous and thus better able to draft, the same principles still apply. If I get a counterclockwise rotation, I will have an S twist. And if I have a clockwise rotation, I'll get a Z twist. So why does that matter? First and foremost, how you spin your yarn when you're making your singles is the opposite of how you're going to ply when you're taking 2 or more singles yarns and producing a final plied yarn. So if you've spun Z, you're always going to want to ply S. This allows the fibers to cling together more effectively in producing that finished yarn. When you're supported spinning, it also matters because it tells you which way to wind your leader and fiber around your shaft to make sure that you're wrapping into the flick instead of opposite of the flick. So in my case, since I spin Z, I need the leader to spiral up the shaft in such a way that you can see this line makes the same slope as the cross piece in a capital Z. If I spun S, I would need the line to slope in the opposite direction. So this is why it matters whether you're spinning S or Z, because you can see how to wrap the leader and then the singles around your spindle shaft. Like I said, I spin Z, so we're going to wrap this guy like so. When you're wrapping, make sure to leave enough length so that you've got a bit of loop sticking out near the tip. I'm gonna go slightly fewer wraps so I've got more. There we go. So you can see we've got just a little bit of loop right there onto which we're going to hook our merino. So taking a small piece of the fiber, going to pre-draft it just a tiny bit to make our lives easier, and I'm going to hook a small amount of this merino through the loop, like so. So you can see I've got the merino and I'm doubling it back on itself. And again, pushing with my thumb of my right hand, I have my Z twist going, and I'm just going to continue flicking the spindle with my hand until I know that that merino is locked in tight with the leader. And there you have it. Now at this point, I'm going to move the singles and the leader further down the shaft. We do not want our cop building up in the top, I'd say third or so of the spindle length, because that's going to be what I like to refer to as the flick zone. Your fingers are going to be operating the spindle there, and if your cop builds up into this area, you're going to be disturbing it every single time you flick. So you need to keep the cop pretty low. So I just showed you how to use a leader to start your fiber on your supported spindle. Sometimes people find that easier while they're still learning the mechanics of how to operate the supported spindle. Once you get some practice, however, you may find it easier to go without a leader. This just requires a lot of practice, but it's actually easier to me because you don't have to deal with having a leader, finding a leader, getting it attached to your spindle, and it's more automatic that you wind in the correct direction for your spindle. So in order to use this technique, what we're going to do is stab the spindle tip through the fiber. So you can see I've got the merino on all sides of the spindle tip. A friend of mine, the one who actually got me into supported spinning in the first place, often recommended licking the spindle tip to, I guess, make it a little bit more sticky, to make it easier for the fiber to adhere. I do not recommend licking a Spanish peacock supported spindle. Probably any spindle, actually, because they'd all probably taste gross, but specifically a lot of the Spanish peacock spindles are made out of exotic woods, which are not healthy to ingest. So if you find you need a little extra help adhering the fiber to the spindle tip, again, you may want to just try a little bit of beeswax. I do not recommend licking it. So once I have the fiber stabbed through the spindle tip, all I'm going to do is just flick my spindle.
What was I saying? Oh, yeah. What I'm going to do is just flick my spindle with my thumb and my first 2 fingers, twiddling it and making sure to keep the fiber on the tip. This is similar to the technique you might see with an in-hand spindle, like an antique French spindle. And what this is allowing me to do is to continue drafting out and adding twist to the merino such that it becomes its own leader. And as it gets longer, I start to slide it down the shaft, again, trying to get it out of the flick zone, the top third or so of the spindle, just like I did with the technique involving the leader. This one seems to be a little short, so I'm going to draft and spin some more merino to allow me to move the fiber down further onto the shaft. Now, you'll notice that it's a lot tighter. I'm having a lot more trouble moving it because it was spun directly onto the shaft. That's actually a good thing because it means it's less likely to fall off. You can also see that I did not have to even think about which way to wrap the fiber around the spindle. It's going in a Z direction automatically because of how I added that twist to the fiber and wrapped it onto the spindle in one consecutive motion. Now that I have a bit more fiber built up, it's easier to move down the shaft. And once it's in a good location where it's out of the way of my flicking fingers, then I can resume spinning like I normally would with my supported spindle. There are approaches where the spinner just continues to flick the tip of the spindle without taking their hand off of it. But for me personally, I would rather let the rotation of the spindle handle some of the work for me while I use my hands to draft. There you have it, 2 different methods to start fiber on your supported spindle. If you found this video helpful, please let me know by giving me a thumbs up below. You can also leave questions or comments if there was anything in this video that I failed to explain. You can also subscribe to my channel to get automatic notifications of any new videos that I upload. And join me at thepeahenspod.com for more fiber adventures. Thank you. Goodbye.